Hi folks, we're Tassless today at your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the extent to which the residential real estate market all across the Western world, but I'll focus on Australia for this video, is really the plaything. It's a toy, it's a plaything of international finance. And gangster money laundering finance. The idea that a house, like a residential house, is something for people to live in and bring up their family and this sort of thing. That's so yesterday. It just isn't happening. So let's have a look at that. Now, what alerted me recently, and I've spoken on this before, but was having a look at the amount of houses in the the $5 million plus sort of range in Australia, but more importantly is how many of them there were, but how quickly they turned over. This took me by surprise. I mean, some of them are lucky to last a week. If they're put on the listings, this is the online real estate listings for sale. If they're put on the listings on Friday, it's often the case by Sunday they're sold. Or Monday they're sold. The speed that these things move at is astonishing. Now, $5 million is, and this is, remember, the entry level, these houses go up to 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 million. If these houses move that quickly at that price point, then there's a lot of people around with serious money. I mean, I don't have $5 million cash lying around or the ability to get $5 million worth of finance that quickly. So what is it? How is it that these places are selling so quickly and so regularly? The turnover of high price point residential real estate, the turnover is unbelievable. You can easily have 50,000 plus. This is in Australia, 50,000 plus properties turning over in a year. I mean, there just aren't that many people with that sort of money in Australia. So what exactly is going on now? It's not a case where you can buy it and just rent these houses out to somebody. That the rent you would need to charge would be, in some cases you have to charge $10,000 a week in rent, and there's not many people around who can afford that. So these aren't people that are needing to rent it out for cash flow or anything like that. These are people who are buying the properties, who've got the sort of financial resources to do it, but there aren't enough people in Australia to do it. I mean, just to at the entry level of, or not the entry level, say the median price. So you're looking at 3.5 to 5.5 million in the median of that sort of 4.3 million, somewhere in that space. Now that gets you into the nice area. So you've got the nice tree-lined street, you've got the good schools, the drug dealers have got the best quality cars and designer label clothing. You've got it's an upmarket sort of area, and the streets are going to be clean. There won't be gangs of hooligans roaming around. If you're your 16-year-old daughter wants to go out jogging or something like that, then she can do it without getting attacked or molested. It's a nice area to live in. Anybody would want to live, if they could, excuse me, in an area like that. Now, you go a bit more upmarket, more money, then you're probably going to have waterfront, maybe your own boat jetty, and so on. Now, the lifestyle that people in that sort of area live, they've got the payments on the house to make and all this sort of thing, assuming they've borrowed any money. But then the on cost, they're not going to have a couple of used bicycles, in secondhand bicycles in the driveway. So they're going to have cars where the entry level price for them is well over $100,000 per vehicle, and they're going to have 2 or 3 or more vehicles in the driveway. They're going to have swimming pools that are very expensive to maintain. They're going to have gardens that are very expensive to maintain. The children will be going to $60,000 a year per head private schools. They're going to have to, pay out for serious money to pay out for university and this sort of thing. So you need a lot of money to do that. Similarly, the way, the lifestyle that these people lead, they're not going to Walmart to get their clothes or Kmart or something. It's designer label all the way, and they live lives of relative leisure. If you look in their refrigerators on their meal tables, they've got no qualms about spending $100 on organic, some honey or something, this sort of thing, so per jar. So this is the cost of living. So to live a sort of lifestyle, and that's not at the top of the range, this is the median level lifestyle, assuming they've got quite a decent deposit for the house, you'd still need between $350,000 and $400,000 a year cash. That's cash coming in the door. That's after tax. You need that sort of level of income. And of course, higher again if you want to have your waterfront and your jetty. Now, the people that have the waterfronts and even the people that don't, if they say got water views but no waterfront, they still will own a boat or have a share in a yacht. They'll buy $1 million yacht and they'll go 3 ways in it with a couple of buddies, and that, so they've got more cash. So that's the sort of thing they need. Now, if you look at the amount of people in Australia that have that sort of income and can sustain those sort of outgoings, then you're looking at quite a small handful of people. But the amount of properties that get sold each month in Australia, the wealthier properties, the high price point, but the amount of sold each month is about 50% more than the amount of people in Australia that have the money to play in that league. Now, you could have the ultra uber rich that are buying up all of them and they just own a gazillion properties each. That's a possibility. But the reality is that, unless they're using it for some sort of productive purpose, like, again, they're renting it out. But at that sort of price point, you can't rent it out. The amount of people who can pay that sort of rent is a handful of people. And if they've got that sort of cash to throw around, they buy something. So anyway, the reality is that it's people from offshore are doing the buying. Now, whether it's offshore money that are used local nominees as flunky stooges to put out front to do the buying, that we can debate. But the reality is that most of these properties, by far and away, I would suggest close on 90% of these properties are being purchased by offshore buyers. Now, why would any government allow this or permit this or condone this when it drives up? It's part of the overall architecture of offshore buying and international buying of property that's driving up the prices. Remember, a property that you could buy for $25,000 in 1971 today is selling for $4.5 million. That's the extent of the appreciation. Or a property you could buy in the year 2000 for $400,000 is now selling for $2.5 million, and so on. Now, if we took the normal trend of real estate, this is residential real estate, office real estate, something different. If you looked at the normal trend of residential real estate that had been in place for, certainly up until the 1970s, if you look at that price appreciation, or even into the 80s, look at that price appreciation, then you'd be looking at a $25,000 property would be in just normal real estate inflation terms, without international buying and all this sort of stuff. It would be, it would be no more than $100,000 for that property that in 1970 was $25,000. Today it would be $100,000, so give or take. Now, but the fact that same property is not $100,000 but $4.5 million will give you an idea just how insane the appreciation. But this is not because local buyers can't afford it. Local buyers can't plan. So residential real estate in Australia was represented, the pricing represented the ability of the local populace from their income, from their 40-hour-a-week job, their 9 to 5 job, their ability to afford the mortgage. Now, the mortgage pricing was priced so that the worker, on an average wage, could afford to buy a house. That was the relationship, and it stayed, more or less constant there. But now it's lost all relationship to the average worker and the average wage. and it's just gone hysterical, ballistic beyond that. But we need to just really come to terms with, and I think come to grips with, that it's international buyers and international financiers, Chinese warlord gangsters, and all these sort of people. They're the ones that are buying, in Indian Brahmin monopolists and oligopolists. They're the ones buying up all the property, and they're buying it, swathes of it, but they're also, not just buying the wealthy, the high price point properties. They're also buying the properties that mums and dads and moms and pops would have bought. The average wage sort of people would have bought to raise their family. Now these people aren't having families because they can't afford it. And as they look into the future and see how financially bleak it looks, they're asking the question, do I want to bring kids into the world to find that this is the future that they have? And many people are quite reasonably saying, well, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to bring kids into the world with such an uncertain future. Now, there are those who say, well, that's a gutless sort of thing. You should just do it anyway and hope for the best. Well, no, I don't agree with that. If the future looks rosy and you've got your big, a large income and you can live in waterfront property and prime real estate areas, well, maybe that's different. You see the world differently. And people, some of the wealthier people, certainly that I know, are having children and have had children. But when you've got a $500,000 income and a job for life in the public service, then, you do see the world differently. But for an average wage worker in the factory that in 1970 could afford to buy a house, today they can't because of international buyers forcing up real estate. Now, the price of real estate, now, the political class have been co-opted into the real estate hurdy-gurdy by the international financiers. And so it's a huge scam now that politicians are being given access. It's like insider trading on the stock market. They're given access to very well-priced real estate, which they acquire for very, very, very generous loan terms, and then they renovate it and then they sell it to a cashed-up Chinese gangster buyer for twice its real worth when they bought it for half what it's really worth, and so they make a huge multi-million-dollar windfall and keep on doing that. And this is how politicians that are penniless when they take political office 10 years later are worth gazillions. But politicians now, and certainly in Australia, and I would think elsewhere in the world, Britain and so on, they have, their more than half their income is derived from real estate speculation of one sort or another. Whereas, before the real estate became an international plaything of international finance. Before that, the primary income that a politician would get would be from their parliamentary salary. Now that's all gone out the window. So the political class has a vested interest in staying with, allowing this outrageous scam, real estate as a plaything scam, to continue, because they now benefit from it so handsomely. You've been with Tasseless today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.